The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the Accent Radio Network or the staff, management, and sponsors of this radio station.
Mr. and Mrs. America, and to all our ships at sea. Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Hughes, and welcome. Welcome to Straight Talk from the Accent Radio Network. And across our grand old republic, we welcome you, and we thank you very, very much for the great honor, for the privilege, and the pleasure of sharing this time with you, and I do hope you're doing well today. Our toll-free telephone number is 866-2-ACCENT. That's 866-222-2368. Our email is Jerry, Jerry, that's me, at accentradionetwork.com. That's Jerry at accentradionetwork.com. And we welcome you to Straight Talk, and this is the Second Amendment hour of Straight Talk, which is heard each Wednesday in the second hour of our radio broadcast. Our co-host is Mr. Marco Caporale. He is the owner of Family Firearms in Brandon, neighboring Tampa, Florida, ladies and gentlemen. Marco, welcome aboard, sir. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you very much, Jerry. We are doing well as every day.
Fantastic. Some good news for us today, and we always like to talk about good news. Many people may remember, Marco, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, how that local authorities, law enforcement authorities, went door to door and in some instances were seizing firearms from survivors, from folks in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that set off a firestorm across the country, folks saying that's just not right. A lot of us remember the picture or the video of the elderly woman and the rough handling she received by law enforcement as they were trying to take her guns away from her. Well, the good people of Colorado, following suit to others in other states, House lawmakers in Colorado have approved a bill that would forbid the state of Colorado from seizing Colorado residents' firearms during a declared state of emergency. The Republican House leader, Amy Stevens, says the bill is about emergency preparedness. She said her proposal is one that several states implemented after Hurricane Katrina, and in fact the National Rifle Association says 31 states now have legislation in place similar to what Colorado lawmakers are considering. Marco, that seems to be movement in the right direction to me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a movement in the right direction. I mean, it was, August of 2005 when Hurricane Katrina had come through, and quickly thereafter, I mean, from my understanding of the statistics, that during Katrina they had confiscated over 1,000 guns. About 6 to 9 months later, they still didn't have anything in place as to how to get those guns back to the individuals. Right. And even with those, in April of 2006, the police there were only 700 firearms that were available to claim, and that's if you could present a bill of sale or an affidavit with the weapon serial number. And a lot of the rumors, as well as some things that have come to light to be true, they weren't even provided bills of sale or any receipts from law enforcement that they confiscated their firearms.
Florida is one of those 31 states, are we not? Did our legislature not enact something similar?
I believe so. I've actually got looking into this. That's one of the things I wanted to look into is see where Florida was at. I do know, and I have to say, I'm not necessarily playing devil's advocate. We do know that the Democrats are trying to throw this down as far as the state of Colorado is concerned.
Yes.
But there is a piece in that legislation that I think is a two-edged sword. The two-edged sword is that there is a private cause of action, very similar to what Governor Scott put in with the preemption law in Florida, but there is a private cause of action against any agency or officer who seizes lawful weapons in an emergency situation, which basically means that now they are personally liable if they mistakenly confiscate a firearm. And that's hard in some instances to determine whether it was lawful or not. Now, I will say one thing, and then, I definitely want to hear what, what your opinion is, but I will say one thing that, for example, the International Association of Chiefs of Police came out with their statement, and they basically said that the bill would prevent police from picking up guns that would easily be seized by looters and prevent state and local governments from prohibiting individuals from buying firearms. Here's the problem. It's not like they're going to go into the middle of the street and pick up these firearms.
Yeah.
They're just not there laying for them. And if they're not considering that aspect of it, and it's more of an aspect of, well, we don't want the guns to get into the wrong hands of illegal citizens, that's going to happen whether there was an emergency declared or not.
Was it Harry Truman that used to say horse hockey? And the reporter said, sure, you shouldn't say that. And his wife, Beth, says, you should see how long it took me to get him to say that instead of the other.
Exactly.
Here is the problem with their logic and their thinking. And by the way, the Chiefs of Police Association generally is very politically correct on most of these issues. However, the rank and file police officers are adamantly opposed to the majority of the stands on issues of the chiefs of police. Jim Curry is a gentleman, I'm sure you know him. He's been with us on several times on our program, and is, I think, one of the vice presidents of the association, a very conservative individual who is strong ahead on this, saying that the police should not have a right to take anyone's gun, especially in a time of an emergency and such. But to suggest that, well, we're doing this to keep them away from the muggers. Let's bring it down to Florida, for those of us in Florida. In the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew, I had people tell me in the Miami area that if they had not had a gun, they would have been robbed, that their wives or daughters would have been raped, that they would have been killed. In fact, I had a contractor, a friend of mine, who came to me and says, Jerry, I'm working in Miami. I don't have a gun. I'm telling you, it's rough down there. I'm telling you, we've had to leave our job because these roving bands of gang members come by and such. He says, do you have a rifle I could borrow? And I loaned him a rifle. And he took it down with him and stayed long enough to help to rebuild the area. Then he brought it back to me and such. But in the aftermath of any type of cataclysmic event or catastrophic event, when there was an emergency, it seems to me, Marco, that's when we need the ability to protect ourselves, perhaps even greater than the norm.
I agree, and I think that the focus needs to be taken off the fact of the mass looting. It was more of protection. Even when they were forced to go into the football stadium, that's actually where more of the rapes occurred. That's where a lot of the gang activity occurred. So I think it does necessarily need to focus more on the protection side of it rather than saying, well, it's going to stop the illegal activity of people looting. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about my 3 children and making sure that they're still alive.
I read a story this week, and this is going to broaden this out a little bit here, but I read a story this week of a man who took a firearm and ammunition. Maybe you saw this. And I forgot how many years ago it was. I want to say it was either 11 or 15 years ago, so I'm going to say somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago. He went to a store in a neighboring town, the store he'd never been into before, and he bought a section of 6-inch PVC pipe and end caps and some other items and such. And he salted away a firearm and some ammunition. He used an iron with these plastic seal bags to vacuum out the air. He coated the firearm externally, internally, with some type of substance, if you will, that as it dries, it almost is like a cosmoline. He buried it, went back to get it 10 to 15 years later, had a little trouble finding it, but he finally found it, pulled it up, and he said it was as new and fresh as it was the day he put it in the ground. And he said the reason he was doing that was that in case of an emergency, in case of a societal failure or whatever, and the confiscation of guns or the removal of firearms, that he would have something to protect his life. Is that taking it to an extreme, or is that something we should be thinking about?
I don't think necessarily on its face value it's taking it to an extreme, because for one major reason, and that major reason is if, in fact, let's just assume here in the United States, if in fact that actually happens, it's not like that's going to happen overnight.
Right.
There are definitely some cataclysmic things that have to occur prior to that. So it's not as if the normal citizen is going to see, well, today I'm allowed to have firearms, tomorrow local police is knocking on my door. But at the same token, we are seeing things leading up to that actually occurring, and therefore that is a possibility for an individual to do. I don't think that on its face value seems crazy or should seem crazy, but at the same time, I want to make sure, at least to everyone else, I'm not necessarily a doomsday kind of guy.
Yeah.
I do see a lot of writing on the wall, and I do want to prepare, but there is a difference between preparedness and hysteria. Yeah. And I think that definitely needs to be taken into account.
And there is potentially, and I'm reaching way out there here, there is potentially, as you said, kind of a double-edged sword thing here, that potentially someone could find that. Now, this particular case, the gentleman went out in the woods. He literally dug a hole in the ground, buried this tube. When he went back, the reason he had a hard time finding it was that the forest that he had buried it in had been cut. And he had to find his coordinates, and finally he had to move a log out of the way and start digging, and he finally found the firearm. But there's always that danger. One, you either lose it, or two, that somebody accidentally stumbles across it in some manner or whatever, and you never know whom that might be. Again, adding to this, you mentioned about not necessarily is it over the top, let's say. Have you seen this new reality program called Preppers?
Yes, I have, and I actually know locally individuals who are kind of following the same mindset. In that case, you're talking about putting it into either some form of bag. I know individuals who are actually using airtight drums for not only firearms but also storage of food.
Right.
The way I look at that is, if we don't need to use it, wonderful, you have an abundance of food, but at least you're prepared if, in fact, we do need it, rather than left holding the bag with nothing.
Interesting story that, I read, I believe it was today, it might have been yesterday, but I think it was today. One of the preppers who had been on this television program has just been ruled to be incompetent by a court and have had their firearms rights and other rights apparently rescinded. I sometimes wonder, is this kind of thing a two-edged sword? Because, let's be honest, there are a lot of us that would look at some of these folks and say, I can understand Boy Scout motto being prepared. Those of us who live in Florida, we prepare for hurricanes and we prepare for emergencies and such. In other parts of the country, tornadoes or floods or cold weather. But anybody can take this thing to an extreme. And then sometimes when that happens, it does give, unfortunately, the Second Amendment or conservatives or those who have legitimate concerns a rather bad name and bad reputation because of guilt by association.
I can understand that, but I have to go back and say that whether or not the individual, because of those actions, were in fact, crazy, but at what point, and that's subjective, At what point can I say that this individual has got one crayon shy of a full box, and yet he should be allowed to do anything that he wants as long as it doesn't inhibit the rights and to do anything to me, either physically or anything else? Then let him store all the food that he wants. That's not hurting me.
Yeah, I agree with you in that regard. I don't have a problem with folks who do that. I think it can become a problem when the person becomes so centered, if you will, or so concentrated in one area that they forsake all other areas of common sense and a family and a friend and perhaps even just continuity of community or whatever, that it can become a problem. But that doesn't happen very, very often. Marco, we need to pause for a couple of minutes. A lot more to talk about on the Second Amendment Hour of Straight Talk from ARN.
If you're looking to buy or sell silver or gold, we're the ones every gold refiner aspires to be. We're Piedmont Gold Exchange. We offer a safe, competitive, easy method for selling or buying gold and silver, and we pay the highest prices in the Carolinas. As a true gold refiner, we guarantee our prices as much as 30% more than our competition. 31 years of experience in buying and selling gold and silver has rated us number one at the top of 5 gold buyers in America. Gold prices do vary from day to day, but our percentage of payment to you doesn't, and therefore, you'll always receive top dollar above our competitors. For more on how you can buy precious metals or sell what you have, go to PiedmontGoldExchange.com. That's PiedmontGoldExchange.com, or call 888-GOLD-916. That's 888-GOLD-916. There's gold in them dark Carolinas. You've probably heard Jim and Trish on several occasions mentioning an amazing, enlightening manuscript written by a beloved friend and disciple of Christ, Fred Bob. In Fred's life, God had revealed to him the direction of the wayward hearts of men and the ever-growing descent into idolatry and Baalism. He calls his manuscript Triumph in Christ, and although written about 50 years ago, reveals a timeless look at ourselves. It clearly reveals the immoral and sinful path of man, yet there's also hope and redemption in his message. Jim and Trish want to share this amazing manuscript with anyone who wishes to read it. We would ask that if you can, to please include a love offering to help offset cost of printing and shipping. Jim and Trish want you to be informed and most of all blessed through this writing and teaching that brings above all glory to the one and true living God, Elohim. For your very own triumph in Christ, please call toll-free 800-504-5511. That's 800-504-5511.
Welcome back to Straight Talk from the Accent Radio Network on the Second Amendment Hour of Straight Talk, heard each Wednesday in the middle hour of our broadcast for the second hour. And our co-host Marco Caporale of Family Firearms, familyfirearms.net on the internet. That is correct, is it, Marco? Familyfirearms.net?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's an individual who owns the .com and wants
that's all right.
$5,000 for it.
Familyfirearms.net. And by the way, I was perusing your site earlier today, and you've got a whole new list of inventory there. You got a bunch of stuff there. So for folks in the Central Florida area, check it out. Familyfirearms.net. Go to inventory, or gun safe, I believe it is, and you can check out everything there. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. We were talking about firearms being confiscated in a time of an emergency, state or national, and how that the Colorado legislature, or at least the House, has introduced a measure saying not going to allow this to happen. One of the things we try to do, ladies and gentlemen, each Straight Talk Second Amendment hour is to talk a little bit about defense or defense issue. And this is kind of a roundabout way today. Marco, I was noticing a story that lends credence and credibility to something I've argued for years, that the .22 pistol can be, or rifle, can be a fantastic defense firearm. But virtually everybody I know says, oh, no, Jerry, you don't want to risk your life on a .22. However, I was looking at a story here, and let me just pull up the headline of the story. Grizzly guns, talking about killing grizzly bears. World record shot with a .22. Now, I understand the record has changed 2 or 3 times back and forth. But if you can take down a 300, 400, 500-pound grizzly bear with a .22 rifle, why is a .22 not a good defense gun?
Well, the majority of people who claim that it's not a great defense gun simply speaks of the fact that there is no knockdown power, which we've talked about this in the past, and it's something that we always advocate in our class and explain, and that is knockdown power is relative. I mean, this is a world record that has been in existence since 1953 that has not been, I don't necessarily want to call it challenged, but has not at least been duplicated. And yes, it's a pure example of the number one rule of either hunting, if you want to call it, or even self-protection, personal protection, and that is it's all about placement. It's not necessarily about caliber. All
right, now to prove that point, the young lady apparently who shot this grizzly bear did so with a .22, looks like a .22 long rather than a .22 long rifle, but a .22 caliber bullet. However, she did have to hit him like 6 or 7 times, 7 or 8 times, whatever it was, in the head, and the bear dropped. As you say, 1953 was the world's record grizzly for a long, long time. So shot placement there again. One shot, okay, maybe that wouldn't do it on a 500-pound grizzly, but shot placement seems to me to be much more important, as you say, than knockdown power. I'd rather have 1 or 2 shots in an area that is going to immediately incapacitate someone than I had hit somebody with a 12-gauge shotgun in the thigh or the arm. It may spin them around and it may knock them down, but it's not going to keep them down.
You're absolutely correct in that. And one other statistic people have to understand, and they may not be aware of, and that is that less than 30%, and it's more like between 15 and 22% of actual shots that have been fired in any personal protection type of situation actually indicates a kill. And most of the time, it's just a wound. And in this case, yes, the .22 is not going to necessarily take the bear out. but it is going to, for example, I think she shot him in the head initially, did knock him over, dazed him, and she continued to use all the rounds that she had left in her rifle, which is a great idea. But, yeah, I know modern hunters right now are using 22 long rifle as well as 22 Magnum for killing hogs. You shoot them in the ears, and they drop like flies, and it gives them also time enough that they don't have to worry about the other hogs usually within the pack so that they can do the same thing.
Well, again, back to the reality programming, what is it, swamp people, where these guys in the bayous of Louisiana are hunting gators, some of these things 1,000 or 800 pounds, and one shot in the head with a 22? That's the rifle they use.
Yep, it's about placement.
Yep. All right, so a 22, then in your opinion, and you're a certified instructor and you've done this for years, 22 in the hands of a proficient shooter who has been trained how to use it would be an adequate home defense gun. Maybe not the absolute best in the world, but adequate.
Absolutely. It would definitely be an adequate, and I agree with your sense in that it may not be the best, but it is definitely one of the most adequate ones.
And by the way, just for those folks who might be new, when I say I'd rather do this, we're talking an absolute worst-case scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody in their right mind, I don't want to even know anyone who wants to shoot someone, who wants to say, man, I hope I have the chance to defend my home one day. That's crazy. That's spookier than a wooden clock. But in the sense of semantics, that if we're going to deal with this and deal with it from a point of reality, that if somebody's going to try to harm you, you are better off to stop them than you are to allow them to stop you. So that's just the way it works, unfortunately. All right. When we come back, we're going to be talking about making money, investing in firearms. Is it and can it be profitable for you? When we continue, Straight Talk from ERN.
Summer rain taps at my window, west wind soft as a sweet dream.
Welcome back to the Second Amendment Hour of Straight Talk from the Accent Radio Network. I'm Jerry Hughes, and on board with us is Marco Caporale. Just a quick housekeeping note. We've been hoping to bring you guests, and we've had a couple of three on with us on our program. We were hoping today to have a representative from the relatively new firearms manufacturing company in Florida, Diamondback. Unfortunately, we've reached out to the folks, asked them to be our guest. Marco, I'm finding a lot of folks in the firearms industry are so hesitant to be interviewed. I guess they're very much afraid that somebody's going to try to jump on them or something. And I try to explain to these folks that we're a pro-Second Amendment program, but our friends at Kel-Tec, they just don't do those kinds of things. They're a Florida company. We've contacted several Florida companies. And unfortunately, rather slow response from our good friends at Diamondback, but we're going to keep working on it, see if we can't get some of these folks on our program in the future. And I can understand they get beat about the head and shoulders so frequently that I can understand that they're a little, no pun intended, gun shy, I guess, when it comes to that.
Sure. Well, I think the other thing too is we're now really in a coming down to the wire on the race for as far as whether Obama's going to stay in the presidency for another 4 years or if we're going to have somebody different. And I think that the manufacturers see this as an ability for Second Amendment haters to use it as an opportunity. So I can understand that.
Yeah, and I can understand and appreciate it, as I say. I can remember even going back years ago to the NRA, and I was a life member of the NRA, and asking for a representative, and they said, well, we'd like for you to submit the questions in advance. And I said, sorry, guys, we don't do that. I don't play that game. I'm going to treat you fairly. I'm not going to try to beat you about the head and shoulders. But some of these folks are just so afraid of being interviewed, it seems. But hopefully we can change that. I have an off-air question before we get into investment here from a listener in Central Florida. And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the listener's question was, we were talking about 22 calibers, and the question from the lady in Central Florida was, can a woman shoot a 22 caliber cartridge without it knocking her down?
I can tell you from personal experience, absolutely yes. My wife, she is a small-statured woman. The issue that she had initially was she could not use a large caliber semi-automatic because physically she couldn't pull the slide back, and two, she couldn't withstand the recoil. I made the typical mistake that a husband does for a wife. I buy a .38 snub-nose revolver for her. She's never shot a firearm before. She shoots it, gun goes in the air. So what we did in order to rectify all that is we started her off with a .22. Mm-hmm. She had at the time was a Walther P22, a wonderful firearm.
Great little gun.
Yeah, absolutely. She loved it. All the physical issues from before, non-existent. Had zero recoil, very much like a BB gun. And then within a matter of 6 months, she moved up from the .22 to a .380, and now she actually carries 9mm. So without a doubt, I can tell you from personal experience as well as from hearing from my customers, a woman can definitely use a .22 cartridge, whether it's a revolver or semi-automatic, without having fear of recoil, as well as it being a little bit lower than the sound-wise as far as the larger calibers.
In fact, let me make a statement here, and you please shoot me down or slap me down if you think I'm wrong. With just a few minutes of an instruction, a 6-year-old could shoot a .22 pistol and not knock them down or even harm them in any way.
Oh, absolutely. The youngest child that we've actually ever instructed was 6 years old, and we used a .22, and the individual, and actually it was a girl, not only was it .22, but she was able to shoot a .380 semi-automatic.
There you go, yeah. Yeah, .22 is just about virtual, like you say, a BB gun, a pellet gun. There's virtually no recoil whatsoever, or certainly no perceived recoil anyway. And the little Walther .22 for ladies, if that's something you're interested in, to me, that's one of the finest little .22s out there. It's reasonably priced, extremely reliable, the ones that I've seen, and they even make a little laser device that goes on the bottom of it that kind of becomes almost an integral part of the gun that is great for sighting. If you're afraid that you might not sight correctly, put the red dot on whatever you want to hit. Don't play with it. It's not a toy. Pull the trigger, and it's going to hit where it's aimed.
Absolutely. For a handgun, it's basically on par with the standard of the Ruger 10/22 as a rifle for young boys.
A good point. Very good point indeed. All right. Some interesting stories in the news. Here's a headline: Why guns are a better investment than gold. Now, that's saying something. Here's another headline. This is from time.com here. Forget gold, why investors are targeting guns. I know people who have bought guns, put them away. I know one gentleman, in fact, who bought, I'll say 3 guns. He probably spent combined $1,000, maybe $1,200 tops. And those 3 guns, according to him now, and I haven't bothered to check, but he's an honest guy, those 3 guns are now valued for the 3 around $15,000. Now, he's had them, as I understand it, for about 10 to 15 years. That's not a bad return on your money. That's not to say that every gun is going to do that, but guns can be a very good investment, can they not?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's important to distinguish the typical gun for investment purposes. It's important to note that, especially in the Time article as well as some of the other articles that have been written, that is the majority of the increase in value are for either handmade or special run, meaning limited quantity firearms, not necessarily the ones that are manufactured on a mass production scale. But then that's not also the case in every case. For example, I hear from individuals, they used to buy what now the Mosin Nagants, the rifles from Russia, for the snipers, for less than $50, and now you can't touch them, and that was 4 years ago. Now you can't touch them for under $115. So I definitely see that there is a progression, and I think for one, it's the fact that you can't get those firearms because there were in limited supply. These are old firearms, or in the case of the Time article, we're talking about handmade pigeon shotguns. But at the same time, the dollar, as far as the dollar continues to fall in value, it's going to make the cost of everything to go up. So with those two combined, you can definitely make a very good investment decision and actually make a decent return by doing that.
Well, and in fact, some of the more modern guns, factory made or assembly line made, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, let's say, a person could have bought a Colt Python 6-shooter, a .357. You could have bought it new for around $500, used for around $350. Those firearms today, if you can find them, can go from anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 depending on the model and if it's had a custom action from the Colt gun shop or whatever it may be. But they have risen dramatically, as many handguns, especially that are no longer made, have.
Correct, and that's definitely, I mean, Colt is one example of a sought-after firearm, which is a modern firearm, not necessarily a classic one or a surplus firearm or anything like that. But, yeah, I definitely see that. And what's interesting about Colt is that sometimes, depending on what the firearm is, the box, the original box from the manufacturer, is just as valuable as the gun itself.
And that's crazy, is it not? I mean, I'll tell you what, I'll share a story with you about a World War II type firearm. When we continue here, we're going to pause for a couple of minutes on the Second Amendment Hour of Straight Talk. I'm Jerry Hughes, along with Marco Caporale, and we will continue in 2 on ARN.
If you're looking to buy or sell silver or gold, we're the ones every gold refiner aspires to be. We're Piedmont Gold Exchange. We offer a safe, competitive, easy method for selling or buying gold and silver, and we pay the highest prices in the Carolinas. As a true gold refiner, we guarantee our prices as much as 30% more than our competition. 31 years of experience in buying and selling gold and silver has rated us #1 at the top of 5 gold buyers in America. Gold prices do vary from day to day, but our percentage of payment to you doesn't, and therefore, you'll always receive top dollar above our competitors. For more on how you can buy precious metals or sell what you have, go to PiedmontGoldExchange.com. That's PiedmontGoldExchange.com. Or call 888-GOLD-916. That's 888-GOLD-916. There's gold in them dark Carolinas. The new book by New Zealand author John D. Christian, Antichrist and the Green Prince, is the most revealing and important book you can purchase and read today. You'll clearly discover the man that is the primary cause of the chaos, bloodshed, violence, death, destruction, and poverty all over the world. Your copy can be ordered immediately by going to GenuineChristianityNow.com. That's GenuineChristianityNow.com. It's only $15, and that includes shipping and handling. You can also order Antichrist and the Green Prince by calling 608-648-2611. That's 608-648-2611. We're confident that you'll find this book so vitally important, we give you a 100% money-back guarantee. Order now, Antichrist and the Green Prince. Call 608-648-2611. Order now, Antichrist and the Green Prince. Call 608-648-2611.
Welcome back to Straight Talk on the Accent Radio Network from Family Firearms in Brandon, Florida, the Tampa Bay area. FamilyFirearms.net on the internet. Marco Caporale is with us. I'm Jerry Hughes, and welcome to the Second Amendment Hour of Straight Talk. I'm going to go to our phones in just a moment. Marco, you were talking a moment ago about the box. I was at a gun show some time back, and a gentleman was talking about a 1911 World War II Remington Rand. And the dealer, the gentleman who was a dealer, says, he says, I think I've got a box for that. If you're ever interested in selling it, he says, I've seen those boxes sell for $250. He says, if you have the box that came in, he says, you can get a lot more for it. And I thought to myself, $250 for a cardboard box? But as you say, even the box, I've even seen firearms ads sell for $50, $75 because of their scarcity and such.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that at the gun shows. Even in our store, it's the same thing. Oftentimes, and I explain these to customers whenever they're looking even to either get appraisal or to sell the firearms. The firearm might be worth, for example, by itself, let's just assume $300, but if you had the original box, and in the case of either a Colt Python or a Diamondback, even if you were to get a Diamondback in a .22, which is extremely rare, if you had the firearm itself, it might be $400 or $500, but if you have the box, it goes up to about $1,500.
Wow. Real quickly before we go to our phones, is there a general rule of thumb with what one might consider non-collectible firearms, a gun that somebody buys, they keep it 3 or 4 years, maybe they want to trade, maybe it's something like a Glock or a Colt 45 automatic now or something like that. Is there a general rule of thumb of what the value is that, for instance, you take the retail price and subtract a third or subtract 50% or anything like that?
Well, we always tell everybody the best rule of thumb, especially it's very much like a car. Once you take it off of the lot, you take the firearm off of the lot, assuming it is a mass production like a Glock type firearm, you're going to lose about 30 to 40% in its value. Now, Glock, what's interesting about them is that because they're so sought after, even though it's a production gun that hasn't really changed much since they started, it is sought after. It is, as far as currency, it's very easily interchangeable. People are always looking for them, whether it be on a private or even in a store itself as a retail sale. So generally, on a Glock, you might lose 15 to 20% from when you purchased it. On the higher-end guns, you're going to lose a little bit more just because the percentage-wise is higher since the value is higher. But if you stick to your Colt, if you stick to your Sig Sauer, your Smith & Wesson, your HK, those are generally you're going to get more than you normally would if you were to, for example, purchase either companies like High Point, Bersa, which, again, are great firearms and great companies. They're just kind of the lower end as far as price goes. So generally you'll lose maybe about 20 or 30% if you hold on to them. And this is the one thing with the article that I think we definitely need to stress, and that is you get a use out of this as well as any appreciation. So if you hold a gun for 5 years and you lose 20%, you've had access to it for 5 years. So I don't necessarily think it's a complete loss.
Not only that, there's another side of this, and that is that while you really can't count every year because it's kind of like cars, some years they go up a little more than others. Most firearms, from my research, appreciate about 5% a year. In other words, a gun that today is $500, next year is going to be $525, roughly. The following year, it's going to be, say, $553 or something along that line. So if you take that firearm as an investment, put it in a closet, put it in a gun safe, lock it away in a safe deposit box or something, in 4 or 5 years, you've got a lot more money that is built up than what you're going to have from your 2% passbook savings. And on a used gun values also go up generally 3 to 5% annually. So if you keep it 5 years, maybe it originally depreciated 25, 30%, but after 5 years, the value of it may very well make it a write-off, an even deal.
Yeah, and it's basically what my father used to tell me, and that is, especially in real estate, you make money on the buy, not on the sell.
Exactly.
Make sure that you're buying it correctly, and from there, with inflation and everything else, your value will increase.
All right, let's go to our phones, 8662-ACCENT, Central Florida, and Janet is online with us. Hello, ma'am.
Hey, Jerry and Michael. I wanted to ask you, do you have any opinion about Colt commemoratives?
Colt, a pistol or rifle?
Pistols.
Okay. Marco?
Commemorative. Sure, I'll tell you, commemorative issues from manufacturers, specifically with Colt, definitely are worth purchasing. And without actually finding out, I'm assuming possibly you're talking about that we're at the 100th year anniversary of the 1911, and a lot of manufacturers have come out with commemorative issues. I would definitely say that it is a very safe bet to purchase a commemorative issue, especially from a company like Colt. They have a long-standing history behind their name, as well as the firearms that they manufacture. And I would definitely say that for investment purposes, I would say that yes, you're fine in purchasing a commemorative from Colt.
Okay, now if you have what company went out of business? Was it Winchester or Remington?
No, Remington. Actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marco.
I was going to say both of those are still involved. Winchester is also called U.S. Sporting Arms, but both of those are still in existence. Colt no longer produces revolvers, but they still do produce semi-automatic pistols.
Okay, all right. The .22 that I was asking about is a long gun. It's not going to knock me down.
No, ma'am. It would definitely not. A .22 long rifle will not have enough recoil in order to do that.
Okay. Did you say your name is Marco, not Michael?
Marco, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Okay. Now,
okay.
You appraise. Does it have to go into your store?
Yeah. In whether our store or any other store, you definitely will need to bring the firearm in because as far as either appraisals for insurance or even for current market value, you're definitely going to want to, as the appraiser is definitely going to want to see exactly what specific model it is. There are different variations. We need to also determine based on what it looks like and the condition it is. The NRA, for example, has a percentage scale, and so we need to look at that in order to determine where it falls in line with the value.
Right. If there's rust on a gun, can you get it off by cleaning it, or is it just gone?
Sure. Well, it depends on how bad the rust is. The majority of rust is surface, and so you can, with a fine steel wool, do that. What you want to be considerate of is not to take down or to ruin the finish it is that has it existing. And I will say certain firearms, especially with the age, even though it has rust or even though the finish has been deteriorated, it's not always the case beneficial for you to have it either reconditioned or to have the rust taken off, because even though due to the age, that rust doesn't detract from its value, but if you were to destroy the rest of the finish, that will significantly detract the value.
Okay. All right. What about, is there a firearm called Stevens?
Yes, Stevens was a company. They're still in existence, but now Savage actually owns them. So depending on the age of, and I'm assuming you're speaking of your long gun, but depending on the age, it might be where there was a transition where Savage actually purchased Stevens, and or it might be Stevens itself before it was purchased from Savage. But yes, Savage actually purchased them, and I want to say it was either around the I think between 30s and 60s, somewhere around there is where Savage actually purchased them.
Okay, all right, thanks. And if I go to your website, your phone number would be on there?
Yes, ma'am, our telephone number is there, and it's 813-689-2000.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Janet, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you indeed. Marco, you said something a moment ago that is very important, and that is for insurance appraisal. Again, anytime I misspeak, please correct me. Most gun collectors probably already know this, but for folks who may have 5 or 6 guns in their home that are reasonable quality guns, like Winchester, a commemorative, something along that line, maybe a Browning automatic shotgun, those kinds of things, Colt 45s, and especially a commemorative. In most instances, what I have found in Florida especially, if you think that your guns are covered by insurance, you're probably sadly mistaken. If somebody comes into your home and takes them, you may be covered up to a point of $1,000, $1,500. In most instances, I think the cap is around $2,000 or $2,500. But anything above that, you're going to eat. So if somebody steals $5,000 in guns from you, chances are at best you're going to get maybe $1,000 to a couple of $1,000s or so back, and the rest of it is just lost. Thus, the necessity for either a rider or some type of supplemental or separate gun policy, huh?
Yeah, I definitely would say that. We've actually given, and again, appraisals for insurance companies differ from every insurance company as far as what requirements they're going to need for the appraiser for it to be valid. But you're absolutely right. And you definitely need to look at your policy first and foremost, and then especially the value of the collection that you have will determine whether or not you want to purchase any of those riders. And the other thing I definitely want to let everybody know, if you're an NRA member, you actually receive, I think it's up to $1,000 insurance on any firearms that you have. But I did find out, and this is through an unfortunate circumstance from a customer, if you don't notify them of what you have and fill out the appropriate paperwork, it doesn't start into an existence. You have the opportunity, but you actually have to fill out paperwork. And if an individual is a member, an NRA member, and does not remember them filling any of the information out, they definitely need to contact them, because although you have that up to $1,000, it's not in effect because you didn't fill out the proper paperwork.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, the company that NRA uses on that, you can buy additional and supplemental policy to cover more than $1,000. I want to say the last time I looked, which has probably been a year or so ago, the cost was around $10 to $15 per $1,000 in value per year. So if you wanted $10,000, your annual premium might be somewhere around $150 or something along that line, if my memory serves me correctly. But that company that, as I say, that you get when you sign up with an RA that has the $1,000, you can actually buy additional insurance through them.
Correct. And if anybody either has firearms or a firearms store or any type of policy that has to do with firearms, they'll know that it's few and far between as to the actual issuer. So I would definitely take advantage of the NRA program as well as any additional supplements that you can get.
Let me go back to our investment a moment. Today in the average situation with the average American individual, any particular firearm, types of firearm, categories, classifications of firearm that you would recommend that folks could invest in, put away, and make money on?
Yeah, I would definitely. The first and foremost, and actually the caller was a perfect example, and I think that you had brought an example as well. I definitely, if you can get your hands on any type of Colt revolver, because again, the company doesn't make them anymore. There is discussion of them coming to Florida and actually having a manufacturing plant. Now, they did also at the same time state that they weren't going to make anything that they've made in the past.
Right.
So that will preserve the price and profits that people have in the old revolvers. But if you can definitely pick up either any of the old Colt revolvers, stainless steel is the ones that they typically have, but if you can find a blued Colt revolver, that is extremely rare because they didn't make that many. So that's one I would definitely. And as far as modern, what I would probably do for investment purposes, and I hate to say it because it's kind of cliche in the times that we are, but I would definitely maybe pick up any type of, for example, AR-15 or any type of rifle like that. I'm not a firm believer that the assault weapons ban is definitely going to come back into place right away, or if there's going to be a quote-unquote ammunition shortage or a huge increase in price. But I definitely think that's something as a modern. It is fun to use for those who've never fired it before, but I definitely think that is something to purchase. And I will tell you that if you are one of those where you think that the world's going to end, not only are guns a great investment, but I will tell you ammunition is a great investment.
Definitely.
And because ammunition can be used as currency at that point. If you are a doomsdayer, it's a gun without ammunition is nothing more than a rock.
Real quick, talking about Colt, throw a name or throw a model out there to you. Colt 2000. You ever heard of it?
I have not heard of that, no.
Colt 2000 was Colt's attempt to get into the military with a 9mm. And there were a few of them made. They did not sell well at all, but I am beginning to see a couple of three of them around. I've seen the ads for a couple of three of them for sale called the Colt 2000, but I don't know if it's unique enough or odd enough. As I say, it was their attempt apparently to compete with Beretta and some of the other boys there, but it didn't fly.
You know, I'm just looking at it right now, and I can tell you that looks very close to Browning's design of the Browning High Power. Yeah.
I believe it was a polymer, if I'm not mistaken, one of the few polymers I think that Colt had made.
Correct.
But I could be wrong on that. All right, how can folks get in touch with you?
You can either go to our website, which is www.familyfirearms.net, or you can actually give us a call at 813-689-2000. And for more up-to-date information, you can hit us up on Facebook, which is facebook.com/familyfirearms.
Marco, it is always an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure, sir. Thank you very, very much for taking time from what I know is always a busy day there at Family Firearms to be with us. God willing, we'll do it again next Wednesday, sir, with your permission.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jerry. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you, sir. FamilyFirearms.net. Marco Caporale. That's FamilyFirearms.net. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, affiliates. Thank you, guys and gals operating the affiliate stations. I'm Jerry Hughes for Straight Talk from the Accent Radio Network. God save the Republic of the United States of America.
This program has been brought to you by Accent Radio Network. Copyright 2012. To order a copy of the show, go online to accentradionetwork.com. Radionetwork.com. 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 Radionetwork.com.